It started as an idea more than a decade ago. Grandmothers here in Canada helping grandmothers in Africa, many of them raising their grandkids because of a generation lost to the AIDS epidemic. Today, the chapters of the group have raised some $25 million across Canada, some of that coming from the group here in Regina. The effort continues this Saturday night with a fundraising dinner at the Queensbury Centre. I've emceed these annual dinners since the Regina group started 11 years ago. Gail Greenberg has devoted many hours to this group in the past 11 years, and this summer she'll take over as co-chair. Gail is in our Regina studio. Good morning.
Good morning, Sheila.
So I know your exciting news is that you recently got to actually go to Africa and see some. So tell me about some of these projects that you saw firsthand.
Oh, well, the one good thing about seeing the projects is you really have an opportunity to sort of see firsthand where your fundraising dollars go to. And so it was really provided a real aha moment to sort of walk into people's homes and actually see the where our efforts unfolded. So there are a couple of places that really, continue to haunt me to some extent. One was a family. There were 6 kids who had all mom and dad passed away through HIV/AIDS. The kids lived on their own. They had been orphaned when they were the youngest was a year, the oldest was 6 years old. And the Trevani Community Home Initiative. It's a group of go-go's.
Which country is this?
This is in Zambia.
Zambia?
So this was in Lusaka, which is the capital of Zambia.
Yeah.
And this particular, these go-go's, these African grandmothers who belonged to this particular organization, went into the home where these kids lived and helped keep them intact. So helped provide them shelter, helped sustain education for a couple of the younger kids, brought health care to one of the kids who actually was HIV positive. So you actually were standing in this home and realizing that the funds that we raised were actually used to support families like this particular family.
So it's not just grandmothers raising their own grandchildren, they're raising each other's
grandchildren. For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's way beyond just taking care of their own kids now.
Is that what this project was all about?
This particular project was primarily about supporting families, women, grandmothers, anybody who'd been impacted by AIDS, HIV in their community, small community.
Yeah, but that whole village raising a child, taking a village.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you must have found yourself thinking about the difference that these grandmothers were making. Like, what would have happened to these children if they hadn't been there?
Go-go's, African grandmothers, they've been raising grandkids for years and years and years. So it's an integral part of family life. But with their adult children succumbing to the disease, they really were the only ones around to take care of the grandkids. And so they just, through their grief and through their loss, they stepped into the role of parenting, reparenting their grandkids. And together they coalesced. They learned from one another, supported one another, developed expertise, skills, began to realize what was needed, and went out and did whatever was needed for their community.
Yeah, and raising children in a world that, here, if you had a grandmother raising a grandchild, you've got running water and all the conveniences. And these are grandmothers who are raising children in very different circumstances.
Very different circumstances. One of the houses we visited, the woman's name was Belita, and 5 of us walked in and we sat on the floor. She had 2 sofas. The house was about the size of our garden sheds. And Belita was raising 3 kids. Orphaned grandkids. 3 of her children had actually passed away. Adult children had passed away. And so when we walked in the house, Belita was sitting on the floor, offered us the sofas. And she made her come up and sit amongst us. The kids actually slept on the sofas at nighttime. And she came from a rural community. Lots of stigma about HIV in the rural communities. And
lots of myths.
Lots of myths, lots of stigma. What was the matter with
her?
her? Why did her kids have 3 kids have HIV and die from that? She was concerned about having to go back to the community, the rural community, because her roof was leaking. She had a thatched roof, and Trevani, a home-based care initiative, provided the funds to replace her thatched roof with one of those corrugated metals roofed, and she was beside herself with appreciation.
It always seems when I hear about these grandmothers projects that they are so direct to the grandmothers and so practical in the needs that they meet.
No layers of bureaucracy. I mean, the money from the Stephen Lewis Foundation goes directly to all the initiatives that it supports. It supports over 1,400 initiatives, 300 organizations around sub-Saharan Africa. And really, There's a real belief that the grandmothers are experts in their own care, in knowing the community. And our responsibility, really, if we take this upon ourselves, is to provide funds to support them. To
They
support the
make
work
the
it is they do.
decisions about where
They
the money...
are the decision makers. Stephen
Yeah.
Lewis Foundation ensures that whatever community organization it supports has an infrastructure set up to support activities, to finance activities, knows what it's doing, has the strength and skill to do what it needs to do.
You said it was great to see where the money goes, but tell me more about that part of it. You've invested so much of your life and your time in working with this group.
we all have,
How did it transform you? What difference did it make actually going to some of these communities and seeing these projects?
Well, we're 11 years into the Grandmothers Campaign. And, I started when I was in my mid-50s, and I'm 11 years later. We're getting older, and we're getting a little more fatigued, a little less energy.
Although you coped last year with a power outage at the
We
Queensbury.
sure did. We sure did.
Holy cow,
We sure did.
That was something.
The one thing about going to Africa is you really get to see what's happened. And really, the campaign has evolved over time. So initially, it was in crisis mode. And the grandmothers were in crisis mode. And they were grieving. And they coalesced and developed resources to figure out what was necessary and made things happen, made it clear what they needed. And so you see that. When you go there, you see it's not the same as it was 10 years ago. Life has changed. These grandmothers are advocating on their own behalf. They're politicized now. They know what their rights are, and they're marching for their rights. So the campaign really has evolved over a period of time, and that really re-energizes me. And you bring back the stories to the group, and it re-energizes the group to know things have changed over the course of 11 years.
All right. Gail, thanks so much for coming
My
in
pleasure.
and
Thank
sharing
you.
some of your
Thank you
passion
kindly.
with us. Looking forward to Saturday night.
We love having you with us, Sheila. Thank you so much.
Gail Greenberg is taking over as co-chair of Regina's Grandmothers for Grandmothers this summer. Now, the dinner Saturday night, I promise you, will be a great time. Maybe you haven't done anything for Mother's Day yet. Think about getting some tickets and taking your ma.